Hey Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles Insider Text service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today we're going to discuss the Eagles' preseason loss to the Steelers, the winners of the night, and the guys who will need some pretty big days ahead to stick around. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Didn't it feel good to be back watching an actual game, albeit preseason, but watching an actual game in the Lincoln Financial Field? Wasn't it fun?
Yeah, I mean, I liked having fans around. Like, I wasn't watching a bunch of players play football in a fish tank or whatever. I mean, like, could you imagine watching Gladiator and they come out and they're killing each other over around maybe 20 spectators? You know what I mean? Doesn't have the same ambiance. You know what I mean?
Bunch of bread just landing in the empty stands. Yeah, that would end up. Bad.
I mean, as I always enjoy working with you in the moment, and kind of get the adrenaline flowing when you're writing on a deadline and turning things around quickly, and obviously the post game press conference. The one thing I would say about the preseason from a writer's perspective is I wish that games were always on Saturdays and they started at 4:00, because covering a night game that I don't want to say doesn't matter is just really hard to the senses. I went to sleep at 3:00 in the morning, and that's not a complaint by any means, because I am somebody who actually really enjoys the preseason. I'm a football junkie. I know you're the same way. You like studying everybody on the roster and finding, dark horses and whatever. But man, you really feel it. When nobody really, when there's three extreme standouts and nobody really does anything that poorly, it's hard to kind of get a gauge. You know what I mean? Everybody was kind of good enough, or they were just kind of bad enough. You know what I mean? It wasn't there was if Jalen Hurts went out and went 8 of 10 for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, then the story is all Jalen Hurts. But really the story of this game was Quez Watkins, Jake Elliott, and the fact that the third-team defense couldn't stop my grandma. That's really what it is. And, it's not as fun to write about. But let's get into it, because we'll get into the game. I think that when you look at Jalen Hurts' performance, if you look at just the numbers, I think he was 3 of 7 for 54 yards?
Yep.
Obviously, that doesn't tell the whole story. That's one of those, if you're reading the box score, you have no idea what happened. So first play of the game, Jalen Hurts scrambles out of the pocket to his right, finds Zach Ertz on the run across the middle for, I believe it was 7 yards. Then the next play, we saw what we kind of saw in training camp, where he checked to a play, didn't like what he initially saw. Dallas Goedert ran a pretty long out route to the sideline, got open. Jalen Hurts put an absolute dime on him for a 34-yard gain. Then we saw him go to Jalen Reagor on a comeback route. The ball was a little off course, but Jalen Reagor still could have definitely caught that. It went through his hands as he fell to the ground. Later on, Jalen Hurts put it on the money for Zach Ertz across the middle, bounce out of his hands, brutal drop. They have to settle for 3 points, but they score on the opening drive. For the most part, the offense moves efficiently. They come back. They're placed on the 2-yard line after Jalen Reagor. By the way, right decision to let the ball bounce within the 10-yard line. Unfortunately, it takes an unlucky bounce. They're set up at the 2. Immediately, Sirianni goes to the air. Quez Watkins runs a go route. Jalen Hurts puts the ball a little too far in front of him, though after the game, both Quez and Hurts said that Quez was held a little bit which kind of threw off the timing, but it's definitely a throw they want back. Then Hurts hit Ertz for another first down gain. They couldn't take advantage. They punted. That was the end of Jalen Hurts' night. Just wanted to recap that because I know that the game's not streaming. It didn't stream nationally. Some people missed it. Some people don't watch it. They just want to recap, etc. Chris, you're the quarterback expert. What did you take away from Jalen Hurts' night? How accurate do you think he was? What do you think he needs to improve on?
I think I thought he had a good outing for given this situation of it being preseason and getting his first live action against a defense that didn't see a lot of the plays, and then they were also using their base offense and seeing what he was able to do in that situation. I thought it was a good job by him. And a lot of times you just want to get the ball in an area or vicinity where a receiver can make a play, and I thought he did that for the most part. One things I thought I wanted to see him change a little bit differently. He took in my opinion, an unnecessary shot when he's trying to make a play and extend it and trying to throw the ball downfield. And I know he's able to make these plays with his legs, but in preseason, that's not a time where you want to see him take a hit from a linebacker or a defensive lineman. You don't want to see that because it adds up as the season goes along. So I thought he did that well. Really encouraged by that check. The check that he made to Goddard. I was really encouraged because I think, especially entering your second year, you want to see these young quarterbacks get to read the defenses, quickly diagnose it, and make the change to a play that's going to work. And you saw he did that. And he stood tall in the pocket a couple times. He looked well on that. So overall, I thought it was a good effort. Some things he still has to improve on, but I liked it.
The majority of the first team offense played 2 series. Brandon Brooks, who played in his first game since December of 2019, played the first series, looked pretty good from what I saw when I rewatched. I thought Jordan Mailata was terrific at left tackle. I mean, he only played about 8 to 10 snaps, but I thought he played very well from what I saw. Suo Opeta started at left guard. I thought he held his own. He played throughout the second team reps as well. Jack Driscoll replaced Brandon Brooks at right guard on the second series and played throughout the second team reps as well. I think if you're the Eagles, you feel very good about your guard depth, especially with Nate Herbig moving into the backup center role. You know he can play all 3 spots. Jack Driscoll can play right guard, left guard, and right tackle. So Opeta needs to kind of show a little bit of versatility, but if they think he's the true backup left guard, I think that's fine if you view Herbig as the backup center and right guard and Driscoll as the backup right tackle. I think Herbig and Driscoll will be 2 of the 3 backups on game day when it's all said and done, mainly because Driscoll can play 3 positions, so can Herbig. Opeta, I would guess, would be the 9th lineman, which isn't a great sign for Luke Doriga or our buddy Coyote. And really figuring out who the backup left tackle is going to be is really going to be something to keep an eye on. I thought Brett Toth, who came in and replaced Mailata, had an up and down night. There were some kind of miscues and blocking. I will say, as we get into Quez Watkins, because that's going to be a big topic of this show, Quez Watkins caught a screen pass in the slot, took it to the house for 79 yards, kind of similar to how he did it against the Cardinals last season. Although that was more on the outside. That was an outside screen. But during that play, really, he was set up by 2 blocks. One from Richard Rodgers, who's on the immediate seal. And then inside, Brett Toth had a very good block as well. Upon rewatch, I had no idea. But yeah, I think he deserves a shout out for that. He did have a holding penalty at one point, I believe, or a false start. He's a guy that's worth watching. The Eagles clearly like him. Jeff Stoutland has worked with him on and off for the past 3 off seasons. So, look, I think they're going to need to look around. I don't think you can simply wait for LaRaven Clark to get off PUP list. But the left tackle spot, especially from a backup perspective, if you do think that the Eagles have an opportunity to trade Andre Dillard, is worth monitoring, because frankly, I don't think there's a guy who can immediately replace Mailata at this point if it's not Dillard. So what's your take on the offensive line and what you saw?
I thought overall, I thought the first and second team offensive line, I thought they did well. I mean, there are some. It got to the point where you saw the Steelers starting to run some stunts in a preseason game. You're like, wait, what's going on here? Why are they doing that? Like, I know it's their second game and they want to work on some stuff, but you normally don't see stuff like that on a regular. You wait to the regular season. I thought, especially, I thought Herbig held his own at center. I was so used to seeing him in a guard, but you saw him in the middle there taking center. I know he's got experience in the past doing stuff, and they've worked with him during training camp with this, but he held his own. I thought he did a good job on that. I said Dillard worked in a not Dillard, sorry, Mailata in a limited role that he had was pretty good, and I mean, even if Dillard even came back and somehow in the first second day, it's Mailata's job. He's definitely do that. But I want to ask you this: what would you be willing, knowing that there's so many questions right now with a potential reserve depth at the left tackle thing, would you still be willing to trade Dillard, knowing that there's a potential dearth of left tackles, and you don't know how soon Raven Clark can come back?
I mean, I think trading Andre Dillard for like a 5th or 6th round pick isn't worth your depth at left tackle, if that makes sense. Like, worth hurting your depth at left tackle. Now, if somebody blows you away, if you get a 4th round pick for him, I can get it. But like, it depends on what your evaluation is of Raven Clark, how quickly you think he can get back. Because really, he was signed clearly as a break in case of an emergency in case Dillard did not win this job. I think the Eagles have done a good job of preparing for the inevitability of Dillard losing this job. Listen, here's the things that Jordan Mailata was going up against. Dillard's a 1st round pick. It's a new staff that needs to kind of establish itself. Mailata is more appealing as a backup because he can swing to both sides, and Dillard can't. So he was going to need to have a great camp and a great preseason, and that's exactly what he's done. This job's his. I mean, the left tackle job has to be Jordan Mailata's. Like, otherwise, it's nonsense. So, Dillard's got an injury with his knee. You've also got to figure out what the deal is with his knee. Maybe you trade him at the trade deadline once Raven Clark's back. But I don't really think it's advantageous to trade Andre Dillard for a 5th round pick. So, and I think that's probably what his value is. I saw Pro Football Focus had a mock trade of a 5th round pick in 2022 and a 6th round pick in 2023 with the Bears. I mean, I guess, but like, you really need to look at the scrap heap on the waiver wire and maybe take a run at a young left tackle. I don't know if they think Coyote can maybe move over and get some reps at left tackle. He played tackle in college, so I don't know. You brought up this stunt. There was a sack on, I want to say it was on Mullins. There was a stunt that the Steelers did where, like, Luke Juriga and Harry Kreider, Juriga was playing center, Kreider's playing guard. They just like completely got like tangled. I just thought that was interesting for a preseason game, but it's not like there's like a gentleman's agreement that you don't do specific, stunts or blitzes, but I thought that was interesting. Moving on to wide receiver. So Jalen Reagor drops that pass on that first drive, and then he comes back and he has 2 catches with Flacco later on. I asked Sirianni about Rager's ability to bounce back, and he brought up the bench route that he ran to get the 13-yard gain. Kind of leaned in heavily to the inside, then running out to the side, got really good separation, made the catch. I think this staff's going to be very good about keeping guys leveled. Even with Michael Jacquet, who we'll talk about later, who gave up a 30-yard pass down the completion down the sideline, then came back and took down Chase Claypool for a 2-yard loss when he sniffed out an end around. I mean, guys seem to be just living from play to play, and I think that's a really good mentality to have. I guess where I'm going with this is, Travis Fulgham didn't get targeted. Greg Ward didn't get targeted. We saw what Quez Watkins could do. Without Devontae Smith in the lineup, what did you take away from the wide receiver group?
I thought it was a thing where I was looking at the routes down. I was trying to concentrate on a lot of route combinations and how especially detailed they were trying to be at, especially with the way that this coaching staff has tried to hammer it home. And it looked like it was Chris. They were moving in and out of the different areas. I thought there were opportunities where, mentioned the Rager drop, but I thought there's opportunities where guys could have gotten a little bit more separation, especially in the second half with some of the third team guys. I thought like they came like Patton and Oz, and also I thought Arcega Whiteside. I was looking to see if he could have made a difference, and he really didn't. To me, he didn't stand out at all. He didn't get a lot of separation. So the top tier guys, Watkins' night was just you're starting to see the stuff come. You starting to see he's starting to get a lot of stuff, pick up the stuff a lot more. Everybody knew about his speed, but when he's running across the middle on those digs and on those dig routes, basically the end routes, the inside routes, and he's got to get better a little bit of those. But you see improvement, and that's the key thing. You want to see improvement when it comes to these young guys, and I think Watkins is making it tough for Greg Ward. When you look at the way you saw Watkins being a lot more snaps now, and Greg Ward's sitting with the second team now, that's making things a little. It's starting to make you wonder what's going to happen if they're going to keep Ward around now to this point, even though he's probably, in my opinion, he's got the most experience out of everybody now. So it's a deep crew, but they got talented. But I think they may see a couple names being surprised. A couple names that we've been familiar with for the last couple of seasons, like in Ward and Arcega Whiteside, are extremely on the bubble, in my opinion. What do you think?
So let's talk about Quez. I'm going to make a statement here, and I don't know if you agree, but I think it's time that Quez gets considered a legitimate starter. And I don't think Jalen Reagor's the guy that's going to suffer because of it. I think it's actually going to be Travis Fulgham, who has dropped quite a few passes throughout the summer. He's been up and down. Like, he's made some good plays, but he's dropped a lot of passes, and it's concerning. And so I think, especially this past week when it really mattered. So I think your lineup, if you truly feel good about Devontae Smith playing X receiver, which God bless you, especially after the guy just had a knee injury in his first week of training camp, and obviously there's questions about his size. But you can use him. You could use Smith at X, Rager in the slot, and then Quez Watkins at the Z spot. That's like a really small lineup, but that's something that Sirianni took advantage of in Indianapolis for several years. Zach Pascal and T.Y. Hilton, and they liked Paris Campbell, and I know they now have Michael Pittman, but for the most part, they've run with like smaller guys. So that could be appealing. I just think Quez Watkins is showing you A, really good growth as a route runner, B, tremendous burst. I jokingly said to myself, they should call Quez Watkins Dynamite because he's so explosive. If you guys don't like that nickname, I did not say that. But look, he's been phenomenal in camp, and he's winning in several ways, right? He had the 2 jump balls touchdowns. I know one was called back in the link scrimmage or the link practices. He's won on go routes multiple times in practice. He should have had a 98-yard touchdown on the Hurts misfire. And then he's winning on screen passes. That I asked Quez after the game what he likes about getting screens in the slot, and he said that it's much quicker, so you can react quicker. But he said that was actually his first one that he's done in the league, which is true because of the one against the Cardinals from the outside. So listen, I think this guy's got untapped potential. I remember being at the combine 2 years or during his time. And I saw this guy just like sitting alone from Southern Miss. And I just went up to talk to him. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. And I was just like, hey, let's chat. And we talked about who he liked to watch. He likes Larry Fitzgerald. He likes DeAndre Hopkins. He likes Stephon Diggs. very unassuming guy. Just kind of interesting to see how he's blossomed since. And look, he's been this offensive story of camp outside of Mailata, in my opinion. So good for him. Let's move on to the tight ends. I think this was a really telling night for the tight ends. Okay, so I brought it up on Twitter and I brought it up in the preview show. Jalen Hurts has done a much better job of targeting tight ends than a lot of us thought he would. You saw him target Ertz 3 separate times. He connected on 2, should have connected on 3, but there's a drop by Ertz, beautiful pass to Dallas Goedert. Those guys are clearly the dudes. I definitely expect them to continue to run 12 personnel as much as Nick Sirianni clearly wants to run 11 personnel. Then they'll rotate when they do 3 receiver looks. But I thought it was pretty notable that Tyree Jackson got the early work with Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco went to him 5 times. 5 times. 4 times. The 5th time was Mullins' interception, which we'll talk about later. Finished with 2 catches for 32 yards. I thought he played relatively well for a project. He's still clearly learning. His routes weren't necessarily as crisp as you wanted them to be. He seemed to have some miscommunications at times. But when you think about it, coming into camp, you would have thought Jack Stahl or Caleb Wilson would be getting more looks. They didn't get targeted at all. They played deep into the second half. Both got holding penalties on the same play where it got called back a Jason Huntley 28-yard run, and both holds were completely unnecessary to the play. So right now, I think Tyree Jackson and Richard Rodgers the battle for the 3rd tight end spot, and that's about it. Where are you on tight end?
Yeah, I thought that so too. I thought Stoll would get a lot more run. I really thought that early on, especially for what they signed him for as an undrafted free agent. I thought they would try to feature him just to see what they had, but they didn't. And that's because Jackson has proven he's earned that opportunity. I mean, you saw what he can do when he gets the opportunity to catch the ball. I mean, he's a big target. He can run a little bit. He's got that big wingspan as well, so he can catch the ball. He has to develop a little bit more on his blocking, I still think, and I thought he did a decent job last night doing that. So it is really intriguing. And right now, if I had to go, hey, you carry 3, I'm putting him above Richard Rodgers because you at least know what Richard Rodgers is at this point. But I think you have a lot more upside with Jackson, and you're going to have trouble trying to sneak. I think you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to sneak him through waivers. I think you really are. You don't want Noah Togiai situation all over again. So Jackson did well. I mean, Wilson, I just don't see it. I mean, I didn't see it last year. I remember when he tries to, his blocking's always, to me, his blocking's been average at best. Just put it nicely. And then it showed again on that play where he and Stoll were called on that hold. So overall, I think right now the tight end 3 spot is Jackson's to lose.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think with Richard Rodgers, he's a vested veteran. So even if you want him, you're probably cutting him, for week 1 and bringing him back. So his contract's not guaranteed. Let's get into the defensive line, and I'm going to let you run with this one because it was a fun night for the front 7. What did you take away from the D-line?
Well, I really thought that Javon Hargrave continued his really strong training camp. He saw he got a lot of push up the middle, and that's the one thing I think you're seeing now is the overall strength that a lot of these guys have. I mean, pushing the pocket back, and it made things uncomfortable for Mason Rudolph, and you saw Dwayne Haskins at times to get happy feet trying to move out the pocket just to see what was downfield. I thought they played very well. When it came to T.Y. McGill, he was another guy I thought that played well. He got some push up the middle along with Milton Williams. I mean, and you see that they're putting Milton Williams more at defensive end now. And he said last night that he didn't really move inside until last year when he was in college. But the fact that he has that versatility gives Jonathan Gannon a lot of options now. And I thought for his it was his first game, like his true NFL action, I thought he played well, and he could be somebody that we see regularly in this rotation. Derek Barnett, the time that he was in, I mean, I saw he tried to do a spin move. It resulted, I believe, it was like a 5 to 7 yard gain on a run toward his side. I thought he had an okay night. There are some things I really thought that he could have done better, like that. Like it's that spin move, moving inside, basically took himself out to play and giving the Steelers running back a gap there. But overall, you see them rolling a lot of these guys in there. It's interesting to see that how they're going to deploy them from here on out. I will add this too. I think I don't see how Marlon Tuipulotu makes this team. I truly don't, because there was so many times that he put himself in bad situations, and then he got bent back. It was I want to say it was in the early fourth quarter. He was taking on the Steelers reserve center, and he got bent back. The Steelers center got inside his pads and bent him back, and eventually pancaked him 5 yards down the field. It was rough. It is rough to see, and for a 6th-round draft pick who believed that this was the system, like he's even said he felt comfortable with the system, he knew the system. You're starting to see that time that way from off the field from the injuries starting to play, and not having the OTAs to start to affect him as well. So I was disappointed as his opening showing so far, but overall, I liked what I saw at the defensive line. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I echo your thoughts. I think let's get into linebacker, because linebacker was interesting. The first team defense, while they played well, had kind of some trouble like bringing down Najee Harris. I thought Eric Wilson kind of missed on 2 opportunities to bring him down during their limited action. I thought Alex Singleton played well. He looked like he was revved up for this game and this atmosphere, as he always is. Didn't really notice anybody otherwise too high or low. Let's move into the DB space, because I thought Anthony Harris played well in the limited action. I think Marcus Epps played relatively well. The guy, though, that I want to highlight is Michael Jacquet. We talked about him earlier. Gave up the big play down the field and then immediately sniffed out of play. I like the way he bounced back, and I think that's something that the coaching staff is really going to monitor as they evaluate the players. You know, as a guy who played semi-pro and grew up playing football, what's your take on kind of like that mentality? I guess Nick Sirianni calls it the dog mentality, which doesn't seem fairly original considering Stoutland's uses the hungry dog philosophy for years. What's your overall take?
Well, I think for a cornerback, especially Wayne Jacquet, I think that's important, because I know from a quarterback's perspective, if I see somebody who's giving up a lot of plays and they have that that down demeanor, that you see them hands on their hips and looking down at the field while you're coming up to the line, like, I won't use the phrase I want to say, but that's the person you want to go at. It's a famous Stewie Griffin phrase that he used on the airplane. But yeah, it's important at that position, because teams will easily sniff that stuff out and they'll game plan around you. And the fact that Jacquet was able to bounce back and not dwell on giving up a big play, I thought that's huge, and you need to see that in your cornerbacks. I mean, you look at Darius Slay, and last year he had that rough stretch against the Seattle Seahawks, and he took that mentality up. I remember asking that question, like, "Hey, you ever thought about help?" Next question. You can't. He has that short attention span. You can't dwell on the bad plays, and I started to wonder that when you have a young cornerback like Jacquet, the influence of a guy like Slay, the influence of a guy like Steve Nelson, mentoring these guys, telling them, hey, you have to move on from there. And that a coach can say that over and over again, but when you have players in the locker room harping that, I think that hits a little bit closer to home too. So I thought he did well in bouncing back. Although the one guy I thought had a rough night in Graham's first name, I thought Zach McPherson. You saw he did well during training camp, but during the game, he had some issues out there. I mean, how'd you think he did?
Yeah, he gave up a couple of catches, but I thought he tackled well. I thought he played the run relatively well. I think he had a penalty at one point. But look, I mean, again, preseason's so hard to evaluate, and I'm not making excuses for the guy, but I mean, they're going to have to feel this thing out. I didn't think he had a bad night, but he definitely was not on the level that he's been in training camp. let's get on to special teams, where I think Aaron Cepas, however you pronounce it, Cepos, had a really nice night. He had 3 punts of over 50 yards. Seemed to have like a huge leg and great positional awareness. I thought he did well. Obviously, Jake Elliott made all 3 of his field goal attempts, 47, 47, and 50. I think it was a good step in the right direction for obviously those 2 specialists who I think, Philadelphia pays a lot of attention to every position, but those specialists tend to stick out like a sore thumb, especially when they're not doing well. So I think it was a good start for them. What's your overall take? I mean, I don't know how much of a takeaway you can really have on specialists, but what do you got?
Well, I thought at Sipos, the main thing, especially his hang time, was really good. You want to give your coverage team a chance to go down the field and get down there. And I thought he did well hanging the ball up. And he almost was able. And the other thing I thought that he did a good job. The ball didn't take the bounce he wanted to, but he got the ball within the 5-yard line, bounced in, rolled in the end zone. But at one point, it was about ready to do a backspin and bounce back toward around the 7, but the nose hit and eventually went to the end zone. I thought that was interesting too. But I think the Elliott thing was huge. We saw he struggled last year. He's a 73.7% percentage completion kick percentage that he made was his lowest of his career, and he was known for kicking 50 yards and above, and he struggled with that last year. And it's not an easy case, but he was able to make the one. I thought that was huge confidence-wise for him and psychologically, too, going forward. So I thought that was interesting to see when it came out of those 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all you can take away from the specialist. Sorry, I was trying to give everybody their due justice, because I do think Jake Elliott is a story this summer, especially when he's facing a make-or-break offseason. The only reason why he's still here probably, or not facing competition, is because he's due so much money from an extension he signed a couple of years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think there were more positives than negatives, because really most of the negatives happen with the 3rd-team defense, and the majority of those players won't even be here or sniff the practice squad. So the Eagles, could potentially make these moves before we even post this podcast. But in our final thoughts, they're going to make 5 moves. I'm guessing that a couple of them will be of the injured variety. The Eagles have 17 players that are listed in some sort of injury report. Guys like Jason Kroom and Graylin Arnold, and some of those guys might be at risk of losing time or losing their spot because of injuries, because you need to fill those spots, especially with the roster being cut down. So that'll be worth watching. I don't think anybody really has a lot to worry about of those injured guys, other than maybe Kroom. I'd have to look at the list a little bit more in depth, but I think there'll be 1 or 2 guys from that. And then I think, Hakeem Butler, that project at tight end is done. He was rolling at wide receiver. I don't see him sticking around. Mark and Michelle, who they just claimed off waivers, played a little bit in the preseason game, but I think he was just there to be a body. Blake Countess, who they brought back for the 100th time, was terrible last night. He was basically there to play safety. He let 3 passes get completed right in front of him. Played pretty timid. Maybe he's lacking some conditioning from being on this, out of the league and not being in camps. And then I think you look at a guy like Kayvon Seymour, who I wasn't overly impressed by. He's a guy that, if I'm him, I'm worrying. Elijah Holyfield really only got some special teams action, didn't really get used on offense. Caleb Wilson, again, it's a new staff, and frankly, he hasn't shown much. Rashad Smith, who I thought had a terrible night, got whistled for a flag for leading with his helmet. Also had a brutal missed tackle on a play where Jalen Samuels just basically ran him over. He's probably the one guy on the linebacker depth chart that has no shot of making the roster. You look at the defensive line. There are some guys, I don't think they'd cut Mr. T right out the gate, but he's probably not long for the roster. Any guys that stick out that you'd be concerned about if you were their agent heading into this weekend and the final cuts that have to be made, or the initial cuts from 90 to 85 that the Eagles have to make before Tuesday?
Well, you mentioned Kroom, and I thought that's the big one, because I think they're at the point now where I think they can lighten up the tight end room. So I think he's one of the guys I think's done. Kayvon Seymour. I made this joke with you last night. It was actually nice to see him up here, but it probably is make an impact. But the problem was the impact was on a negative light. Yeah. He gave it a pass. So I thought he was another guy that should have that one. And Count just looked like he was hesitant so many times, because he could have jumped one of those routes, and he could have broken it up or attempted to break it up, and he was getting his timing back or something. So he was another guy that I thought was all right. I would have thought, and I'll be honest, I would have thought coming in that Andre Patton would immediately just be okay. He's here for a couple weeks and he's gone, but he seems to be all right. I'm not saying he's going to make the 53-man roster or anything, but I thought he was going to be one of the quick guys that fills it in and just get rid of him. But
yeah, he certainly has a Travis Fulgham vibe to him, right?
Yeah, he's going to linger around. So I thought he did all right with that. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with you on your most of your other ones, especially Rashad Smith. I mean, that you can't, with the emphasis the league places on head and neck area, to throw your shoulder and use your helmet to go right into another player's head like that. That's costly. If it was a regular season game, it's 15 yards and it kept a drive going. You can't have stuff like that. It led to a Steelers touchdown. So, and couple that with his I thought he misread a couple of plays too. That wasn't great.
I will tell you a guy who I saw that I think saved himself from being an early cut is cornerback Lavert Hill, who made a great play on the final punt by Cepas. It was a 53-yard punt. The returner made the first tackler miss, and then Hill brought him down for a 7-yard loss. I thought that kind of stood out, especially when you consider that Sirianni brought up Austin Eckler and Terrell Davis being former guys who stood out and made the best of their stuff. Another guy that I thought played relatively well, who will stick around maybe a little bit longer is oh man, I just blanked. Elijah Riley had that pick, maybe the one bright spot on defense in that second half. I didn't think he was that in danger of being taken off the field or taken off the roster this go around, but I think he's here to stay, at least towards the final cut down. What's interesting about the initial cut down with the amount of injuries the Eagles have is you have to fill out the roster, and you also have to keep your guys preserved. We found out last night Miles Sanders being preserved until further notice, which makes a lot of sense considering he's had injuries in the past. But you're not going to want Jordan Howard if you view Jordan Howard as the number 2 running back, which according to the depth chart, that's what they have. And according to what we saw last night, he was the first guy up. At his age, you're not going to want him taking hits. So you're going to need to fill that running back room with Kenny Gainwell, who I thought actually played really well as a receiver out of the backfield. You're not going to want to play Boston Scott a lot, so you need Kerryon Johnson. You need to fill reps with Jason Huntley. But 3 running backs in the preseason might not be enough, so maybe Elijah Holyfield gets held on for another week. You also look at the wide receiver group. You don't want all your guys out there. Jalen Reagor shouldn't be playing 2 quarters anymore. Quez Watkins shouldn't be playing 2 quarters anymore. You got to see what you got in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and all those other guys. So it'll be interesting to see how they make these cuts. We'll keep you fully aware of what's going on Eagles Extra. Remember, you can sign up for free at NJ.com/text. Also, make sure you download the No Huddle Show podcast and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Chris, it's been a pleasure.
It's been fun, man.
Yeah, it's been fun. We'll be back after some joint practices with the Patriots. It's going to be a fun week. We'll talk to you soon.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's an episode we recommend.
What up, though? I'm Jalen Rose. I partner with the New York Post to bring you the Renaissance Man podcast. Each week, we're discussing the latest trends in culture, fashion, entertainment, travel, food, and more. My most recent guest is none other than the legendary makeup artist, Bobbi Brown. I talked to Bobbi about the changes she's seen in the beauty industry and using your insecurities to drive your career. You can find the Renaissance Man podcast every Thursday on Apple, Spotify, or any of your preferred podcast platforms.
Acast recommends.